When we're looking at Debian-based systems such as Ubuntu, we have a very dynamic configuration, being able to relatively easily add in new configuration or remove that configuration. So we have one main configuration file, and that's our /etc/Apache2 and the Apache2.conf. All of the configuration exists in the etc and Apache2 directory or subdirectories thereof. If we're opening up the configuration file in Vim, we can always set the syntax so it's read correctly as an Apache configuration file. These syntax notes are at the base of each of our files, so we can then use this to set our syntax highlighting. When we take a look, we've got a whole load of commands starting A2. So we've seen previously that we can access our status page. Now, if we don't want that status page, we can disable the module. And this is just going to take out the elements that enable the status page. But we do need to restart the Apache server after changing the configuration. Now, when we try and access the server status, the page is going to be unavailable because the module is not loaded. So we've got A2N mod and A2 dis mod to enable and disable modules, but we've got the same thing for configuration and for sites. We can always check our configuration using the Apache2ctl command and -t for test. Now, it's going to give us a warning that the server name is not set. The server name needs to be set in our default site as well as in the main configuration. So we can go through and add in the server name directive to our default site and then open up our main configuration and add in the server name. Once we've done this, we can test our configuration. We shouldn't get the warnings. And again, we can restart Apache. The other thing that we need to look at and understand is the document root. The document root is set for each site. At the moment, we just have our default site. We can go through and list out the contents of the configuration file, and it will show the path through to the document root. If we add in our own web page, we'll put a very simple web page here for the moment, but we can then go through and add it in. When browsing through to our site, of course, we're going to see now my page rather than the default page. When changing website content, because we're not actually changing the configuration, there is no need to restart the Apache web server. Oh, look at this, the glorious blue indicating that we're about to dive out to our command line where you can gain great hands-on experience understanding your Apache configuration. And we're going to do that by reviewing the configuration files and tools that we have in Ubuntu. Once we've done that, we're going to be setting our server name directive and adding content through to our document root. And here we are at our Ubuntu 2 system, our Apache 2 server. And we're going to learn a little bit about the configuration. And maybe the first thing we can do is go ahead and list the contents of the etc and Apache 2 subdirectory. So using ls/etc/Apache2. And we can see the main configuration file, Apache2.conf. But that really just includes other files such as our ports.conf, as well as other configuration files that are going to be in the enabled subdirectories. They'll actually be symbolic links that link back to the available subdirectories. And we have then directories for conf, configuration files, modules, just for configuration that loads modules, and sites, where our virtual sites are defined. To manage the symbolic links, we've got a tool called A2. And then we can see using tab completion that we've got disabled configuration, disabled modules, disabled sites, or the enabled version. As well, though, we're looking at the end, we have an A2 query that can be used to query our configuration. If I put in the option -m, we can look at the loaded modules. And from that list, we can see our status module is currently loaded. Well, if we then disabled the module, it wouldn't make part of our configuration. So we can go through and do a sudo a2 dismod for disable a module. I can use tab completion. Tab completion now is only going to show me the module files underneath the mods enabled. So I can then use the status. When we look at it, though, it says it's now disabled. We've removed it from the enabled subdirectory. The link is deleted, but we have to restart the Apache server. We've changed the configuration. But we're going to make some other configuration changes, so we'll leave it without restarting just at the moment. At any stage, we can always test our Apache configuration using the Apache 2 CTL and -T option. And we can see that we're getting a warning coming back, and it's saying that we couldn't determine the host name of our system. We haven't set the server name directive globally. So it shows that we must set it globally, so in our main configuration file, for this to be effective. So you know exactly what that means, that we need to then go through and use sudo and our text editor of choice. So I'm using Vim, and we can go through and take a look in etc Apache 2, and remember the apache2.conf. So this is our global configuration. There won't be a server name directive in here. So we can use then the uppercase G to move to the end of the file. The end of the file also shows me the syntax highlighting that should be in place. That is in place for us, so I don't need to run it, but it reminds us of our controls for when editing Apache files. I'm going to add in my server name directive. So just going up one line and into insert, and then server name in mixed case. And then we can go through and put it to www.local. We can put the dot at the end. That's required in our DNS configuration, but it isn't really required anywhere else, but won't cause a problem. We can always go through now and test our configuration. We can see that we've now suppressed that warning, so we are good to go. But we should also set this within our virtual host. Each virtual host, if we're accessing by a name, should have then the server name that is set. So if we are running multiple virtual hosts, we can go to the correct named site. If I look at A2 dis site, I can show the enabled site. Because, of course, to disable a site, the site must be enabled. Now, there is no need for me to disable the site, but I do need to edit the configuration. So I can then move through to etc Apache 2 and then sites. And when I look at this using tab completion, we've got the sites available, which are the main configuration, and the sites enabled, which are the symbolic links. For ease, I'm going to go into the enabled directory and follow the symbolic link. So we go into enabled, and then we'll only have the one file in here, so I can use 0 and tab. This is our default virtual host. As I move down the configuration, we can see at the end of the first comment block, there is a server name. So I can go through and uncomment it. Uppercase A moves to the end of the line in appending mode, and I can change it then to www.local. And then I'm ready to escape and save my changes, and we'll be ready to go. And that's really all the configuration changes that I need to make. So I can test my configuration before I restart the server, but it's all looking good to go. So I'm happy now to go through and use my sudo and systemctl and restart the service, which is Apache 2. Now when I go through and query my modules, I should see that the module is not loaded. So A2 query -m, we don't have the status module. To be honest though, just as I clear my screen with Ctrl and L, I do actually want the status module. We'll be using it later when we look at restricting access to that page. So I can go back and use Ctrl R, look for my status. Now, of course, that's not the command that I want, but I can hit escape to edit the command and change the A2 dis to A2N. That's good. That's enabled the module, but we do need to restart. So let's restart Apache. And look, we've restarted Apache. When I query the modules now, we're able to see that the status module is backloaded. Now, having been changing our configuration, we've seen that we've needed to restart our server. But we also have our document root, which is part of our configuration for our virtual site. When I look at editing this, we can see for my default site, the document root is var www html. Well, I'm going to leave it at that, so I'm just jumping out. But I'm going to add content to that. So I can go through an echo, and we can have something very simple like my page. And we can pipe this through to sudo and t and overwrite our /var /www /html and index page. We see it on the screen, but it's been written to the file. And if I now go through and look at w3m and take a look at my www.local, we can see then that I'm seeing the page that we've created coming back rather than the default page. So again, we're proving everything is working and we didn't need to run the restart. Let's jump out of this. So that's our configuration done and dusted. We're going to be spending a little bit more time looking at the configuration, though, in the next clip as we look at configuring our logging.